Well, gentlemen, I don't think there's any ladies here today, are there? No, not seeing any. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to do this. Gonna do the best I can here to try to run this program this way. Anyway, June meeting, probably gonna be the way we do this for a while. And if anyone has a problem with it, I'm recording this session in the hopes that instead of taking minutes, I'll be able to just send this recording out. If there, and I don't know if it records the pictures of the people online or not. I'm not sure. Jeff, do you know how that works if you record it?
I'm not sure how it works.
All right. Well,
probably a pretty big file though. So
yeah, I know. I'm gonna give it a shot and see how it works out. But I just want to let everybody know, if you don't want that going on, let me know, and I'll just stop it if anybody has a problem with it. I'm just trying to find a way to get this information out there without having to take the minutes. Anyway, we'll start with a call to order. There's no housekeeping issues that I know of. The sign-in list, all I'm doing there is just simply making a screenshot of the participants, and that's what I'll use for that. As for the minutes from the last meeting, there weren't really any issues. I didn't get those. Taylor had put those in a format that I unfortunately have lost. But we've had 2 meetings since then. Our national one and then our local one. Jeff, if you can you send me the meeting list of the, let me get it here, the FSDO DPE list, the link for it, for finding the designee locators?
I'll put it in the chat. The current one, you mean, with the DMS link?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, okay. Okay, the additions to the agenda. We're gonna, I've got DPE code of conduct in there, but I haven't heard anything about that. And they basically asked the FSDO to stay out of it anyway, last time I talked to Tina. So I'm gonna have to find the individuals that are working on that and see where that is. The regulation regarding instrument currency we started to talk about before. Does anybody have any input on how you log the instrument currency and what the requirements are? Yes, no? What we have here is an order from the FAA. If anybody wants to know how your approaches can be, what needs to be done to be logged, there's still some, I guess, clarification needs to be met or dispersed out there that any approach that you do counts. It actually has to be under simulated or actual conditions. And this is the information for operators from the FAA. It's 150-150.12. If anybody wants to look that up and show that to any of the individuals or schools that have any questions about how that works. This is just the front page of it. But there's more to it than that right there, but that's just the front page to it right there. We just had an issue under standing topics here, issue come up regarding instrument cross-country training. I know, Jeff, you got the phone call from Jim yesterday, right? Okay. Yep. This is what hopefully we're all doing our due diligence on checking to see that even though there's a 141 grad certificate, that they are complying with the different kinds of approaches along these cross countries. So I put both the part 61 and 141 up there. Is this showing up to everybody? Okay, yeah. Okay, great, thanks. So there's the comparison between the 2 of them there. The issue that came up, and Jeff, if you have anything else you want to add to this, was that this one particular school was utilizing the minimums portion of the approach is determining whether it was a different approach or not. So an RNAV approach, whether it's an LPV, LNAV, VNAV, LNAV, is one type of approach, right, Jeff? Yeah. So if someone did an LPV somewhere and an LNAV somewhere, those are not 2 different types of approaches. Simply look at the title and what we're telling and I'll be putting out a little letter on this here in the next couple days to all the DPs. Look at the title of the approach. If it's an ILS, if it's VOR, if it's RNAV, and RNAV encompasses 3 different or sometimes 4 different types of minimums. So an RNAV approach is only counted, no matter what minimums you use, it's counted as one type of approach. So if you do see, which just happened, an LPV approach and an LNAV approach as 2 of the 3, that will not work. Everyone understand what we're talking about so far?
So I guess we're talking about the same with a localizer or a, you know, whether it's a precision or non-precision. So
Right.
Localizer too?
That's the issue, Danny, is that this one school was saying, but an LPV is a precision approach. It's not a precision approach. It's a precision approach that can, an approach that can be used in lieu of the precision approach on a check ride. And they were, their concept was, or thought process was that it is a separate type of approach. An LPV approach is still an RNAV approach. The minimums have nothing to do with calling it a different kind of approach.
Right.
Another example is VOR, VME. That's the same approach. You're using a VOR and the VOR procedures to execute the approach, simply as adding a DME to it. And ILS is separate from a localizer because they're 2 different types of approaches. And once again, in the interpretation of it, the ILS is actually still the only precision, quote unquote, approach. The only time that the LPV is considered to be used for it in lieu of it is for the check ride, not for the 3 approaches at different airports. And
I got a question, Phil, on that. Is there a minimums? It seems like,
no.
I remember they've changed that or removed the minimums. It was at some point like as long as it was 300 feet or 250 feet.
Yeah, for the check purposes of the check ride, it has to be 300 feet or less so far. And that's what Jim Pittman is working on with the group, with
That's
the,
right.
the FAA, on trying to get, at least here in our arena, to get us a letter of agreement to allow other LPV approaches for the purposes of a check ride. Okay? But,
take all the pressure off of Casa Grande. Phil, on that, when you talk about this, it's the same kind of approach. What if I do the ILS in Casa Grande and then come back and do the localizer for the non-precision? Is that okay?
Separate approaches.
That's 2 different type of. Now you even got it clarified better because one's a precision and one's a non-precision.
Exactly, and the word is or. It says ILS or localizer, so it is 2 approaches.
So look at what I put up there. This is right out of the regs. Part 61, 3 different kinds. They basically say the same thing, except for some reason under 141 they use the word involves. Okay, down there you see involves, but it's 3 different kinds of approaches. Another misinterpretation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff. You do not have to do. It does not have to be at 3 different airports, right?
Look at paragraph B.
Paragraph B.
It says an instrument approach at each airport. You could go to 2 airports and do 3 approaches real easy.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Okay. But it's not 3 different airports. You have to do an instrument approach at the airport that you use for the cross country, but you can simply do 2 at the same one. It does not say, Ben declared, I think that was Ben that said that. To clarify, it does not say 3 different airports. You see that? Everybody see that?
Yep.
It just says you have to do 3 different kinds of approaches, but it doesn't say you have to go to 3 different airports. So
It doesn't say you can't do 2 at 1 airport. It does not say that.
You can do 2 at 1 airport.
You can.
Yeah. Oh, you could do 3 at the same airport.
But then you're going to have to do 4 because you got to do 1 at the next airport.
This is correct. And I have seen cross countries where there were 4 approaches. There were approaches done. I've also seen where 3 approaches were done at 1 airport and they came back to Gateway and no approach was done. And they accepted a visual approach. And from what we went through a couple of years ago, that was not under ATC directed routing. As soon as you're given a visual approach. So they had a problem. Whoops. Phone went off there. Siri is starting to record what I'm saying here. So we had that issue too. But does everyone understand what we're talking about here?
Mhm.
There is a common getcha that I see is with respect to paragraph C, 3 kinds of approaches with the use of navigation systems. So guys will go down to Yuma, and Yuma approach will ask them, hey, can you do a PAR? And they'll say, yeah, sure. And then they'll do the PAR. The PAR does not qualify.
You're correct, and that's also in one of the letters that. And let me preface some of this with something else. When Jacob was with the FAA, he was the POI for Transpac at the time, and he actually wrote a letter stating that Oak City had already decided through their letters that an LNAV and LPV were not two different types of approaches. I wasn't able to take Jim Pittman's response with Jacob's letter that was written by Ryan Brown. He's not on here today, but I was hoping Ryan would be on here because he was the one that wrote the letter asking if they could do that, and it came back with no. I'll try to get that letter out, but
Can I share?
here is when you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Can I share a screen real fast? Oh, never mind. Never mind. It doesn't allow me. Anyway, there is a legal interpretation, by the way.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you know, it's not just us saying, Jeff's opinion or Phil's opinion. I guess, yeah, it doesn't let me.
Well, how can I do that? How can I allow you?
I don't know if you can disable it or not, but I can just give you the number and you guys can look at it. But it's Glasser 2008.
Okay.
And the question was about the PAR one specifically, if that can count. But then they referenced farther down, it said, as shown in the above paragraph, which you have on your screen right here, the 61 II, A, B, and C. It says, clearly states that to satisfy the requirements of a cross-country flight for instrument rating, a pilot must use 3 different kinds of navigation systems, because of that word right there, navigation on sea.
Yeah.
So obviously a PAR doesn't work. So 3 different kinds of navigation systems.
Right.
Then back to my question about the ILS and localizer. The localizer part of that is the same navigation system. Is that
One's
okay?
probably a little more gray because of that part, but you're adding another navigation system with the vertical guidance. So I think and because it's precision, non-precision, I think that
Okay.
adds to the argument that it's different. I don't know a for sure answer for that one, but I don't see how that could be the same approach in that case. But an LPV or LNAV or LPV still is using RNAV, so that's the same system. So there's no.
Okay. And remember, if you accept the visual approach, you just negated that. Because you're no longer using a navigation system and you're not under direction of ATC. So they just cut.
Actually, now that I'm reading a little farther, this legal interp says, under the April 4th, 97 final rule, FAA did not specify the kinds of navigation systems a pilot must perform. So they can choose any 3 of the following. And this obviously sometimes have changed, so there's more, but NDB, LDA, VOR, GPS, SDF, and then it classifies it as an instrument landing system localizer.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't even mention ILS, the glide slope part. So I'll have to look that one up for you guys to for sure confirm it.
Okay. All right.
But for sure, LPV, that's an RNAV. So whichever one you do, that's one navigation.
That's right. It has nothing to do with the minimums. Type of navigation system you're using. Any other, let me see if somebody else here is. No, nobody else. Okay. Any other inputs? Whoops. Gotta quit. I gotta learn how to do this. There we go. Okay. We gotta learn how to finesse this this mouse a little bit better. Any other comments, inputs on that topic right there? Yes, no? Okay, I guess if it's quiet, I have to get used to this, Jeff. I guess if it's quiet, it means no, huh?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other issues or problems that would like to bring up regarding qualification of the applicants, training records, or procedures that are being taught or instituted by some of the schools that are not in concert with the manufacturer's recommendations? Nope. Okay. That was pretty easy. There'll be a, yeah,
I had to deal with an aircraft owner last week. His airplane, he was teaching in it. It's an older 172. And he starts off before I even met the applicant with, now I know the book says to pull carb heat when you pull the engine idle, but it's 105 outside. So I tell him not to do that. And I just had to tell him, well, I need to see them do what the manufacturer says. You know, he's, well, I did all these tests and nothing, you know. I said, well, you know, then go through a recertification process for your airplane. But if the book says carb heat's on, then it's got to be on. Was
Yeah.
I right?
Yeah, I would think so. If the checklist says that, sure. Because it doesn't state anywhere in there that you have a temperature limitation or
Oh,
range to not pull the carburetor heat out. You say that the instructor had told them not to pull the carb heat out?
yes. The instructor / owner of the airplane.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Trained them when it was over 100 not to use carb heat.
Yeah, that's,
We got that fixed before the test started.
okay. That's one of those negative training things. So a person's got to start looking at temperatures before they do that. Okay. Any other issues in that arena?
Well, Phil, there is a common misunderstanding with respect to carburetor heat. When we were doing traffic watch in a carbureted airplane, we got carburetor heat in Phoenix, Arizona in the summertime. We got carburetor ice. The 172, the 152 would ice up at 6,500 feet. MSL, it would ice up bad when the monsoons came in. So maybe with an ambient temperature of 100 degrees, but keep in mind that for Arizona, we get carburetor ice in the summertime when the monsoons come in with the moisture.
That's right, because of the high humidity. And that's one of the factors, you know, the little FAA book states expected between, what does it say, 20 degrees Fahrenheit, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And the addendum to that is in high humidity conditions as well. So that's a good point. Obviously, the concept is, what does the manufacturer say we should do? It's not hurting the airplane. And if it was, there would be a caveat with it from the manufacturers, the way I see it. So yeah, no, that's a good point. And probably something that may need to be brought up. I really haven't seen an issue with it myself. So that's the first time I ever heard of a situation like that. Okay, we do have a new publication, the Aviation Instructor's Handbook. Just came out about, I want to say about a week ago, maybe, and it's now in a format where you can actually download the whole book. It came out as only PDF chapter by chapter. Obviously, that will not apply to a lot of the examiners unless you're doing the CFI stuff. However, the PTS is still the PTS. Jeff, have you heard any information on the instructor ACS publication?
I have not.
Has anyone even been in contact with Susan Parsons at all?
I'm not that I'm aware of.
Okay, all right. The latest I heard was 2021, was June of 2021.
Hey, Phil,
Yes.
that Aviation Instructor's Handbook, they just put a revision out day before yesterday where you can download the entire document on PDF now at the FAA.gov website.
I actually got that this morning. I just did get that, but yeah, originally I had taken the time to download each chapter because I wasn't sure
Me too.
I was going to do that. but anyway, it's out there in full page format. It is different. The biggest change is that they're no longer using the word student. It says learner. That's the term that's being used now for the student, is the learner. Some other discussions, they're getting, they added a chapter on risk management and aeronautical decision-making for the single pilot operation. So obviously the risk management portion is on all the ACSs. And some of my interviews with some of the individuals going through check where I said there's very little being done regarding the risk management portion of the areas of operation. So I just want to make sure that we're we're still throwing in some sort of a risk management scenario question, so on and so forth, because every task has that in there. Let's see. Under professional, don't really have anything there. I know that we haven't added any DPEs at this point. And Jeff, we're not looking at adding any more at this time, are we?
Not for now, no.
Okay. My question to those individuals that are here, have you seen a decrease in the request for check rides?
Who did you ask that of?
Any decreases in the request for check rides?
Not me.
Okay.
Well, I laid off for about 2 months. I put a letter out that I was starting up again into May, and I got 8 booked within about 2 days.
Okay. That's probably because of the break in there. I'm just checking to see how the activity has been. So let's see here. Oh. All right. Best practices. Anybody want to comment on any scenario triggers or questions that they've been coming up with that may have had better responses and how the test went, or some things that they're seeing that are starting to pop up? We had some issues popping up again with the flap retraction on short field landings. And not in concert with the manufacturer's recommendations. But has anybody seen anything else like that they want to comment on? That would be a no, I guess.
Well, I was giving people a minute to respond.
Oh.
I've had an issue in 2 orals in a row when we're discussing the causes of a spin, and both applicants, the answer to, well, what causes a spin, they said an aggravated stall. Hang on while the clock chimes. I went into the book to do some reading, and it describes full stalls and imminent stalls or impending stalls. There's no discussion about a aggravated stall. Yet you go into the spin thing and it says a spin is caused by an aggravated stall that is then uncoordinated and so forth. In further questioning the applicant about, I said, well, what do you mean by an aggravated stall? They said, well, the ball's not centered. What is an aggravated stall? Does anybody know? The book uses the word 2 or 3 times, but it never tells you what that means.
Anyone want to answer that?
I guess silence means no.
Yeah. Since you brought that up, Larry, I have noticed that the stall spin awareness, while it's in the ACS, we used to have the special emphasis areas, and of course that was listed in there, and now it's just been incorporated into the stall and slow flight areas of operation. And I noticed that there are still some misunderstandings on how that's supposed to be tested. Obviously, we don't go up and do spins, but it does need to be orally covered. Hang on a second. There we go. Okay. All right. Hi, Lonnie. It does need to be, still needs to be orally tested in whatever manner that is. And I'm not sure that that's being covered well enough as I get a lot of the CFI applicants. Very few of them can actually explain the process of getting out of the spin. It's variations on the recovery procedure. And granted, each airplane's POH/AFM does not all say the PARE thing, that they're not all like that. It's individualized to the aircraft and the manufacturer. TTL airplanes are going to be a little different than a conventional tail airplane. So just want to emphasize we need to keep going with the stall spin awareness discussions and the check rides. One
of those applicants, after saying it's caused by an aggravated stall, I said, well, then how do you recover from this spin? And she mentioned neutralizing the rudder, and then you do something with the ailerons. I said, what do you do with the aileron? She says, you put in enough aileron to lift the nose to the horizon.
Well, I thought everybody did that, Larry.
That ended the check ride right then.
Yeah.
And she also told me that pulling the primer out turns on the pitot heat.
Yeah, I think that's probably
And that retest is tomorrow. Wish me luck.
that's probably limited to that individual. But I do know that generally speaking, there's still a misunderstanding
Yes.
on on spin recoveries, and why. I think we're missing the part on why do you pull the power off? Why do you neutralize the ailerons? What's the reason for the brisk movement of the elevator? Things like that. So in our discussions or our testing with these individuals, while it's not something we're doing as a skill set on the check rides, we still need to make sure we're covering that, because that is that's on the private and commercial as an area of operation. The other issue is in my next on July. I hope to have some polling questions like we did when we watched the local and the national meetings, where it's de-identified. But we can put some questions up there on how do you test this, or what's the concept of the test, the evaluation on this, where we can have some questions and answers up there so we can kind of see where the group is on their understanding of certain things. I hope to have that done for the July meeting and create some questions where we can throw our input in there and it's de-identified so nobody knows what's going on. One of the issues I see with the double eyes that I have been training that have gotten their instrument rating probably within 6 or 7 months prior to me working with them. When the question on when is an alternate required, we need to make sure that we all understand what the regulation actually says. And it says that the pilot will always require an alternate in his flight plan, unless, and then we get to the as the learners call it, the 1, 2, 3 rule. I found that they go, well, it's the 1, 2, 3 rule. And I'll say, well, what is that? An hour before to an hour after 2003. Would everybody be happy with that response?
I would ask them to apply it. I'd give them a weather condition and ask them to apply
Well,
their rule.
I'm getting that part. So is that a satisfactory answer to that? Here's the problem. What we're finding out is that they memorized an acronym, which or a mnemonic, which this gives them the rote understanding. But Larry brought up the point. So I've given them the weather, and I've said, tell me if I need an alternate or not. So something we might want to think about doing is actually giving them a scenario where they have to apply that and see if they understand. If the weather is 2003, I've asked them, do I need an alternate? And they go, oh, all I did was memorize the 1, 2, 3 rule. They don't know how to apply it. So just food for thought or for those that are doing the instrument test, is to see if they can actually apply that, part of the regulation. The other thing that along those lines that we're seeing is the weather in Echo Airspace above 10 and below 10. We have a little problem with that one too, is what is it at 10? So once again, keep in mind that they're just memorizing above 10 and below 10. They're not looking at the outer aboves, outer belows, more than, less than. So just food for thought on that one is to maybe dig a little bit deeper in those mnemonics to see if they actually understand the application of it. Any other comments in that arena?
A lot of times when I give the weather for this IFR check ride is I'll give them the weather that may make them need an alternate or not need an alternate, but are there any considerations to be made when you're filing for this flight plan?
Mm-hmm.
And asking them if they need an alternate or don't need an alternate, you're kind of using applications so that they can determine whether they do or they don't themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's the idea.
You have to ask it. I mean, it may have to come there, but hopefully they know with that weather whether they do or they don't. I mean, that's what I'm looking for.
And when I'm training the CFIs, obviously, I'm working with them to show instructional knowledge of a particular a rating. So when they say, well, I just used the 1, 2, 3 rule, I said, well, tell me how that works. And honestly, they can't tell me if the weather is 2003, if they need an alternate or not. They don't understand the at or above, at or below, more than, less than portion of what they memorized. So, and the same thing with like the airspace, Echo Airspace above 10, below 10. They don't understand, well, if I'm at 10,000 feet, what do I need? And they can't, they have to look it up, which is fine, except that when you're trying to show instructional knowledge of something, telling your student if it's below 10, it needs to be this. If it's above 10, it needs to be this. So that's where I'm having issues with the memorization of the acronyms or the mnemonics, whatever you want to call them.
And how to use it in practical application, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'll say, well, I want you to teach me how I determine if I need an alternate. Along those lines too, the other part of that is that the both the instrument students and the II students are simply going for the 802 and 602 when I say, how do you select the alternate? And they're missing the first part of that regulation that says to look and see if that airport or approach has non-standard alternate minimums. But they tend to go straight for the 802 and 602. And they've totally blown off the fact that there's an A on the NOS charts, you know, A with a triangle around it, is you need to go there first before we worry about the 802 and the 602. And many times Tucson's a good example. It has non-standard alternate minimums. Okay. That's pretty much all I have. I don't know. I don't have any information from the groups there, AFTW, ASAG, FAST Team, and AUWG, User Workers Group. So I'm hoping to put the invitation out for the next meeting to those individuals as well, and hopefully we'll have some input from those groups on a monthly basis. Jeff, Greg, anything from you guys?
Not for me. The only thing I was going to bring up was the legal interp to show that the RNAV stuff. So
good, yeah. And if you can send out that letter to us, that'd be great. Craig, anything from you?
Yeah, I got a couple of things, Phil.
Okay.
Circling back to when you were talking about ACS, I did talk to Susan Parsons before the COVID thing hit, and she was very frustrated because apparently there's a movement in place to try to put these ACS documents through the same or a very similar type of rulemaking process, such that you would with the regulations themselves. And of course, this, she said this would slow everything way down. And my primary interest in that is I really want to see, well, I want to get them all out, but I really want to see the instrument ACS, because it's going to remove that 300-foot limitation for using an LPV in lieu of an ILS.
Okay.
So there's that.
Okay.
Next thing, I think hopefully everybody got my email about that Northeast practice area. I sent it to all the schools that might use it and all of y'all. And it's gotten better. So if any, I didn't really have any complaints on designees, but it is working better anyway. The residents are a little calmer. And just as a side note to that, most, and I'm hearing that a lot of folks are using these ADSB apps, the homeowners are, so they can identify tail number, altitude, blah, blah, blah. And in the 3 that I checked, one gave an accurate altitude readout. One said the airplane was 200 feet lower than it really was, and the other one said it was 500 feet lower than it really was. So evidently there's an accuracy issue with those things.
Okay. You mean with the home apps?
Yeah, the Flight 24 or Flight Radar 24, whatever they call them. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And then last thing on my list was I had a couple of complaints from over the weekend. One from one of y'all that Glendale was not allowing operations in their airspace because evidently 3 airplanes constituted a full pattern. And I did call over there and talk to the tower manager today, and Of course, he wasn't on duty, and you know, he pointed out that yeah, he'll look into it and everything, but he said, you know, they're on the weekend mornings, they're trying to staff the place with one person at all positions. So you know, there's ground operations to consider. There's Luke. There's anybody getting a clearance, and you know, I mean, it could end up being a lot of work with only three airplanes in the pattern. So I mean, I'll give them that, you know. So, but they're going to look at it and see if their operations have increased, and if they can, they'll try staffing up a little bit. He said, at any event, you know, that's a non-federal tower. Word he's getting is in they can probably go back to full operations in a couple of weeks. It's going to depend on a couple of things.
Okay. All right.
That's everything on my list.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to show here, let's see if I've got it here. Oh, we're past that. Regarding malfunctions, this was under the what do I call it there? Scenario triggers and so on. This is right out of the Airplane Flying Handbook. Might be something that's worth showing to your applicants in the debriefing process, or to some of the instructors. Is here's a good listing of the malfunctions, causes, corrective actions. Obviously, the corrective action is always going to be to follow the manufacturer's checklist, but I don't know if you all have seen this, but it's kind of a nice one-stop shopping for a lot of the different malfunctions that can be presented to the applicant, or in the case of the instructors, where they can go to one place here and show them how these are handled. But anyway, if anyone's interested in that, it's in near the back section of the Airplane Flying Handbook under emergency operations. Let's see. We don't really have any guests, so there's not any of that. I've got the next meeting will be, as figured, going to be another virtual meeting on the 14th of July at 1 o'clock. That's what we're looking for the, yeah, Ben, you have a question.
So tomorrow there is a runway safety meeting for Gateway.
Okay.
And bringing up Glendale Tower issue, as well as Chandler Tower being a non-fed tower. Is anybody experiencing any difficulties with being able to get approaches? Are there staffing issues with respect to Gateway? Has everybody just given up on Gateway?
I'm supposed to do the first check ride there in probably 10 years, so an IFR check ride, so I hope it's all the same. As long as 3 zeros in use, I'm sure.
Well, the problem is that there was intervention, and they would take it right up to 10 knots before they'd swing the airport. There's some human intervention in the weather reporting. There were some issues that were brought up, that have been brought up. The biggest thing is just staffing and duty time regulations, et cetera, that they have they are trained to the same standard, but they don't work under the same work rules. So duty periods and such are not the same as a federal tower. One of the things I want to bring up is they talk about a number of runway things that they've made changes on. But how many of those incidences that didn't raise to the significant whatever level of runway incursion, but how many of those the controller had actually been on position at the low grade occurrences? Craig, do you have any info other than that going into this meeting tomorrow?
No, not really, Ben. You know, it's going to be a lot of it. I think it's going to be follow up from the last one. You know, some of the new tools that they got, you know, the new data, but no, nothing really new.
Well, you know, we were told we were going to get some responses back, and I haven't heard anything. And last I checked with Josh, he hadn't heard anything. It's unfortunate that we can't, you know, we all got to go down and beat each other up down to Casa Grande, and where we can't have a nice radar facility.
Yep. So, Craig, are you going to that meeting?
Yeah, it's virtual. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think these RSATs, I think anybody can go, can't they?
Invite only, and I kind of had to beg to get on.
Ben, are you going?
Yes, I am. I canceled 2 check rides so that I could go.
Okay. All right. Anything else? One of the things I'd like to request, and I will put out a, now I'm getting a little bit better with this computer and emailing stuff here. What I'd like to do is have any input from the examiners who may or may not be able to attend the virtual meetings with any questions or comments, so that we're not waiting until one time a month to talk about the, as we have it here, problems, issues in regards to the check rights, qualifying issues, so on and so forth. So I'd appreciate it if I could get any input throughout the month of anything, so that I can bring it up at the meeting and possibly make, if there is any type of PowerPoint issues that might help us with some of the things. But I'll put that letter out here in the next couple days there. I'll accept any input from the group out there throughout the month, so that we're not just hitting it up one time a month for
And I've got a question here. Sorry, it is, we can't start a check ride unless we know we're going to finish it. And I'm trying to think the practical application with this is, okay, we do a ground, the applicant is doing poorly, and you're going to finish it tomorrow and let them go do study overnight or something, is probably why they came up with this. If you did a check ride knowing the wind is going to be high and they're probably not going to fly, but yet they're already there ready to do ground, I mean, what's the consensus here? Or even I had another examiner call me where they did one check ride in the morning, and it was a letter of discontinuance for wind, had another check ride to start. I mean, the wind could die down. It couldn't be, I mean, maybe not. The forecast said it wasn't, but would that examiner be okay to start that next check ride knowing the wind was high?
I'm going to refer this to Craig and Jeff, but I remember a while back, a while back we had an issue with the intent when the check ride was scheduled, if I'm not mistaken, was that it was going to be completed at once. And when the weather issue came up, it's kind of like our quasi CFI issues with CFI check rides. But Craig, do you remember what the concept was? Wasn't there some sort of a letter or input from the FAA on the intent when it was started? Was to be able to start the check ride, if that was the intent when it was started?
Well, yeah, that's what it is. It's the intent. The CFI is the really good example for that, because we know that so often it's not going to result in a flight later that afternoon or whatever. But yeah, it's just the intent that, if the conditions were okay, you would be able to do the whole thing, or if it didn't take too long, or if the person didn't get sick or whatever. But I think they don't want it scheduled as 2 events.
Right. And I think a situation where the weather is an issue, do we know when we start the check ride that it's going to be gusting to 25 knots for the next 3 hours?
It might not.
That's right. So I think our thought process was that it was okay to start.
Yeah.
Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there's a practical application here. This is Ben. There's a practical application here in that if you, when I do my briefing of the potential outcomes, my last thing that I cover is the discontinuance, and I ask them right at that point in time, is there any reason why we would not be able to complete the test today? Are you feeling good? I'm feeling good, etc. And pre-qualifying the applicant. Sometimes they come up and they say, hey, I didn't get any sleep last night. Okay, then we really shouldn't start this test. But also if, hey, the winds are going to be bad. Well, how can we test them if we say, okay, well, we'll go ahead and do the oral, but then we'll come back tomorrow and do the flight. They have to do the replanning again. They have to look at the actual winds and actual conditions of the day of the flight. So why make them do the work twice? if it looks like they're not going to fly, I clarify it right up front. And if they're not comfortable with a 2-knot crosswind, then so be it. We're not going to fly today. If they're comfortable with a 15-knot crosswind, okay, let's talk about it. But I'm pretty clear cut with that at the very beginning. If it looks like, if they think that they're not going to be able to fly, then I give them a lighter workload we'll just reschedule.
Well, you used the word there. It says, it looks like the winds are going to be high. So when it looks like, that's not a hard and fast rule. I think what you're doing is fine, but I think along those lines that if it was, we don't know for sure that the winds are going to be bad. Of course, if your applicant, in your case, Ben, actually says to you, I don't think I can do this today, I think you have no other way to go than what you just did. If the applicant is already, well, obviously, if they're not feeling good, they're sick, those are reasons right there to not continue the process.
Yeah,
But
not even.
if everything's going fine and we don't really know what the weather's going to do, I think we'd be okay. Unless, Craig and Tina just joined us too, by the way, have any other thoughts on that?
No, nothing other than what we did.
Yeah, but like say, Ben, if you ask that question and they've given you a reason to not finish, that's cut and dry. Just like you say, they've already told you that I don't think I'm going to be finishing this check ride today for whatever reason.
Phil, this is the other Ben. Can you hear me?
Hey, Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Hey, under that scenario right there, I think it falls under aeronautical decision making as well. I've had multiple applicants who see the wind is going to be up to 25 knots and don't say anything during the oral, and then it's time to go flying, and they're willing to go flying in something outside of the comfort or skill zone, and that's where you can determine some aeronautical decision making as well. And if we give them that option right from the beginning, then we're kind of leading them into making our decision for them.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think actually when I think the weather does go south or an airplane that they planned on using just came in with a write-up that maybe we have with the inoperative components. Remember what the final factor is on whether or not the pilot can take the airplane. There's the legal aspect of it, right? There's 91205, there's what the manufacturer says, blah, blah, blah. But the final decision is still, does the pilot feel comfortable flying this airplane like that? So I like the fact that an opportunity is given, because we simulate so much stuff in these check rides that it'd be great to have some real life activities happen where we can see if they're really making the right decision, right? So I think if the individual says, I'm okay at this, and then the winds get to a point or the weather gets to a point where, you know what, the ceiling when we started this was 5,000 feet and we're not going to be doing high altitude work for whatever reason, an instrument rating or whatever. But now it's down around 3,000 feet. You know what, it's still VFR, but I don't want to go. So I think those are great opportunities to see the ADM. And I actually look forward to some of those when there is an anomaly where they have to make the decision. And then you have the individual who says, well, I'm going anyway. Well, he just called that one for you.
Right.
The way I look at it, that was an easy call because, well, does that exceed your personal limitations, which
exactly
we now are supposed to cover in the ACS concept. It says personal minimums and proficiency versus currency. So fortunately, the FAA was able to get those concepts in there along with their risk management. Is this a good idea? And once again, if there's an attitude indicator that doesn't work on an airplane that's, or a DG, it's on an airplane that's just be doing a private pilot VFR ride, while the reg says that's not required, the manufacturer says, I don't care if you have it or not. The pilot says, I'm not comfortable flying that airplane. That is the ultimate decision right there.
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Hey, Phil, this is Rock.
Hey, Rock, how you doing?
Good, good. Hey, just to get back to Danny's question, who was mentioning, first of all, that factor of weather or aeronautical decision-making, but also the potential for a second applicant later on that day, if the first one discontinues, just keep in mind the order about the 24-hour notice, and just keep in mind to coordinate that with your managing specialist if you're going to go that direction, so that you're not violating the order. Just a little
Right.
note there.
Okay, thanks for the input. Thanks for the input.
What order, what specifically are you talking about, Rob? I missed that. I'm sorry. This is Ben York.
Oh, the 24-hour notice for the 8,095.
Okay, okay, thank you.
And you know, sometimes it just requires that little extra coordination with the managing specialist, which I've done with the VPs that are assigned to me. So.
And once again, in regards to the 2 check rides in the same day, that first check ride individual may have decided that 20 knots exceeds his personal minimums and proficiency level, whereas the second check ride individual says, I don't have a problem with that. So I would not see an issue with starting that second check ride.
Or saying we start the check ride and then you can determine, if granted a satisfactory pass, whether or not the conditions are better.
Exactly. So, and I hope that got everybody's, Danny, your question answered, and the FAA input is kind of in agreement with what we're thinking there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else from anyone? Tina, are you there? Well, she was. Okay. She shows up that she's there.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Any input? Tina, do you have anything to add?
No, not right now. Sorry, I came in late. I was on an airworthiness meeting, so I was hanging out with those guys, but I'm catching up.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I have. Anything from anyone else?
Yeah, is the blue hand talk to the hand, or is that I have a question?
Yeah, there you go. Go ahead, Bobby.
No, I was just looking at, there was, in the participants field, there were raised hands or blue hands, which.
Yeah. No, I think we got them all.
Well, Ben didn't take down his hand being raised.
Oh, I see. He did it.
Sorry, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Maybe I need to put out a letter on this. Is my first time using this anyway, so hopefully this is not.
Shoot, this has gone good.
Not too painful, but I hope that as we progress with this, Tina, since you just joined us, I kind of see this as probably how this will probably go. I'm sure for the next few months, and maybe possibly a permanent issue, because Bobby was telling me that he's got a fair amount of DPEs in Dallas that are interested in the DPEG process, and I think to be able to put in invitations out to all the chief flight instructors, any instructors that want to watch this stuff, will make this a whole lot easier to possibly get more participation from our group as well as the people that we serve. So, but I'll get better at it. I'm not intending to do death by PowerPoint, but there are some other things that I can throw up here in regards to regulations and stuff when we're talking about what the word is versus what we think it should be.
Phil, I'd like to say thank you personally for putting it together. This saves me 2 hours of drive time, and well done.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's still a work in progress. I was actually just doing most of this stuff about an hour before we started, trying to figure out how to work with Zoom and get everybody logged into the program and all that. But and Tina, what I mentioned before is I've recorded a session. I'm trying the recording concept, and if there's any individuals that don't want to be recorded, I obviously will not record it or put it out there. So, but I'm hoping that's not an issue in lieu of copying down minutes. So I think the best thing is, Ben doesn't want you to see his beard, so that's why he's not there. If he opens it up, there he goes. He doesn't want you to see. He's one of those airline pilots getting paid for sitting at home growing a beard. Yep, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, I think we're finding some. Go ahead.
That actually looks pretty good, man.
Oh, don't tell him that. Don't tell him that. I thought it was just going to be me and Craig's little goatee thing there going on. But what are we going to say?
No, I was just saying, thank you for doing this. I think we're finding some hidden benefits of doing all these Zoom meetings. It's been going real well so far. We did our fast team rep training over Zoom a couple weeks ago, and it's working out real nicely. So yeah, it saved you guys some drive time and the way that we can get it out to more people. So thank you again for organizing this, Phil.
That's
I
what
second that from up here in Prescott. So this is the first, well, one of the first, quite a few years ago I was at the DPEG meeting, but this is great.
Well, thank you. And any input that you have or things that you want to see presented, like I said, instead of waiting for a monthly meeting to talk about the problems or issues we're seeing out there, send me all this information and I can organize it and put it right in here so I can present it then, or even get the information out. But some things that, like a certain school, a good example was just this LNAV LPV thing that maybe doesn't need to wait for a month to come out to let people know that that's the same approach. It doesn't count as two separate approaches. So things like that need to be issued, probably at a quicker time pace than this. But what I'm hoping is to get the AFTW and all these other groups invited so that there's a rep from each one of those groups that can, put their input in right at the meeting from the comfort of their own home. So we can actually get information from those groups instead of just waiting for their meeting to come up. But if they have something they want to bring up, they'll go on with that. So apparently, I paid for this just before we started the meeting to do the paid version, so it didn't kick off after 40 minutes. So apparently they accepted my payment. They'll let me stay on here for a longer period of time. Anybody knows how this works? You can do one-on-one for free, but as soon as you do a group, pay the money. It's no big deal. It's not that much anyway. But see, y'all at the FAA get it for free.
No, you're paying for it. You're a taxpayer, right?
Thanks, Jeff. Now I'm paying for it twice.
Quick question. Comment. I'll forward the question on to higher ups because I can, now that I've thought about it more and read that legal interp doesn't differentiate between localizer and ILS either. So it kind of says instrument landing system parentheses localizer. So how the ILS fits in, one could argue that those are the same approaches. Are the same, they do the same horizontal navigation and you add a vertical component, right? With another system. Well, WASP kind of works that way too, right? GPS based, and now you add a ground system and it makes it vertical. So I'll forward it up. There's no legal interp on ILS versus localizer being as separate. So,
but we are agreed on the LPV LNAV concept.
It seems that, yeah, that legal interp indicates that that's not a different navigation system at all. But you'd argue that.
Yeah, because in that one, the title is just RNAV.
Yeah.
On the top of the plate, no matter what minimums you use.
So the issue is, if you have one that says ILS or localizer versus what if it's ILS and then you're just shooting a localizer only? It's the same and the corner doesn't change. So there's a lot of variance in that one.
If you find we can't use it, don't tell us.
There is no legal interp for the ILS part, only the one I found that mentions 3 separate navigation systems. And a localizer is in the localizer approach and the ILS approach. So I'm not sure about that one.
Hey, Jeff, when you're looking at that, one of the thoughts that I have is the 135 op specs will identify, as well as the air carrier op specs, identifies types of approaches authorized. And that might give you some guidance or some information with separation of the types of approaches.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember that op spec I'll check into there and see if there's something leaning one way or the other, at least in that realm. So thanks.
Sure.
And just to throw this in too, I wish Jim Pittman was here today. I have started or was asked to serve on a committee with AFTW to come up with some kind of policy for an addendum to the stack procedures, if you will, down at Casa Grande on how to handle IFR arriving traffic that's going to come in over the VOR and maybe hopefully do a circle and then an approach. A lot of flight instructors now are filing IFR into Casa Grande so that they can say, I'm IFR, I get priority, that kind of thing. So we're going to see if we can come up with some kind of a fix for that, and also to let the schools know that when they use Casa Grande as part of their IFR cross country, if they're coming in from Gila Bend on the airway, and when they start talking to us, they're already down at 4,500 feet, so they're well below the MEA already, and they hit the VOR and go straight in on the approach, which none of the approaches can do. So I've got a feeling they're getting cleared for a visual with Albuquerque Center, which negates that approach for their cross-country requirements. So we're going to come up with a policy for the stack and maybe a little educational information for the schools. So if anybody has thoughts about that or ideas, feel free to submit them. We're trying to find somebody else to be on the committee. So far, it's just me.
Do we know, Larry, what's the last thing Albuquerque says to the aircraft before they cut them loose?
We don't know yet. That's part of the goal. And some people have said, oh no, Albuquerque Center has coverage right down to 3,800 feet, but I've been over there at 8,000 and they said I was below their coverage. So
no,
I don't know.
They don't have it down that low.
Having done the approach in IMC, the Albuquerque Center just simply tells you you're cleared for an approach. They don't specify.
Right.
And it's very troublesome in IMC. If you do it in IMC, be aware that there is going to be somebody underneath the base of it running around on a practice approach.
Yeah.
As you come out at the bottom, out of 3,500 feet, there's somebody that's running around at 3.
What altitude did Albuquerque descend you to before they cut you loose? What was the lowest altitude Albuquerque gave you?
5.
5. Okay, that's my question. Is where are they terminating their coverage with you at that point? I was curious how low they took you with them.
At 5,000.
It's going to depend on which airway you're on. The MEAs are different as you come across.
Well, it's not always MEA though. It's also their minimum vectoring altitudes.
Do they have that down there?
They do.
Okay.
Actually, I got a retired TRACON guy that I just did a CFI reinstatement with. I will training with. I will ask him what their MBA is. But I think what Ben said, 5,000. I think that is as low as the center can take you at Casa Grande. It doesn't necessarily have to do with MEA. So got to remember, MEAs don't guarantee ATC radio coverage. It only gives you navigation coverage, because there are MEAs where you, in certain parts of the country, where you can't talk to ATC. It's just, it only guarantees navigation coverage, not ATC. That's actually a question that I used to ask on the instrument check rides, was if they understood what that meant. And a lot of people actually think it guarantees you ATC communications, and that's not what the MEA does. Good. These are good discussions. Thanks for throwing that information in there. Anything else? Nothing else. I'm ready to hit the stop button. Guys, thanks. Women, thanks for showing up. I appreciate it. Hopefully it was somewhat of a benefit, my first time at it, and I hope to make it better as we get further along. And like I said, any information that the DPs can throw at me throughout the month, whether you can make these meetings or not, I appreciate it. And then it kind of gives me an idea of what's the problem with just one examiner or one school, whatever, so we can kind of see if there's any trends. Thank you for your input.
What? Good job. I don't remember
Thanks,
seeing.
Phil.
What's that?
I don't remember seeing 16 people in the building for the last few DPAG meetings. So.
Tell me about it, except when you made them come there.
Yeah, great job. No technical difficulties. The only suggestion, make the PowerPoint, the font bigger. Some people have screens.
I realize in the agenda, so it should have been, that should have been, that one should have been big enough. Is that big enough?
Good. But yeah, perfect. Great job. And then if it gets real big, you might just want to have a second host, another DPE that could jump in if you lose your internet or whatever. That's the
Oh,
only.
got it. Oh, okay, I'll do that. I'll make that.
They can take over and control.
Yeah, yeah. When I did the agenda one, all I did was copy one of the old agendas, and I'll just have to do that in a different manner. But actually, forget about that. What I'm going to do is I didn't do it this time. I'm going to email the agenda to everyone, so you have it in front of you, and that's not what we're staring at on the screen. So that's what will be there. There'll be something else like this or whatever. But thanks for the input, y'all.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Great
Phil.
job, Phil.
All right, see ya.
Aloha.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.